Welcome to this short video, which is an introduction to something that many of you might have thought about in these days of increasing complexity in our lives, with material things making more and more demands on our attention, time and money. And these are also days of increasing anxiety too, with cost of living crisis and austerity, etc. The 19th century American naturalist, essayist, poet and philosopher Henry David Thoreau once spent 2 years, 2 months and 2 days living in a one-room cabin on Walden Pond in Massachusetts, living a simple life, growing his own food, enjoying the pleasures of nature, etc. He wrote a book about the experience, and it contained the famous line, "Our life is frittered away by detail, simplify, simplify." And many have since pointed out that if he'd really been devoted to keeping things simple, then just one simplify would have been enough. Even so, the thinking behind it has resonated down the years and touched the hearts and consciences of millions of people, including myself, I should add. So, what did he mean, or what do we mean by detail? And how can we begin to simplify our lives? In many ways, I suppose it's something that's been relatively easy for me, and something that I've always done pretty much out of necessity, because I've never earned very much in my working life. For reasons I won't go into now, I've moved around a lot job-wise. I've had more than a few dead-enders that haven't paid very well, nor had prospects for a rise up the promotion and income scale. Not that I've ever really wanted any of those things anyway. My private life and the things I do in it, my hobbies, reading, writing, artwork, music and so on, has always been very important to me. It's always been where I've lived, really. There's the old saying, I don't live to work, I work to live, and that's always been something I've stuck by. I've not wanted hugely responsible jobs or managerial positions where I would have to work long hours, perhaps take work home with me. And I've also tended to get bored very easily with jobs, so I've moved on to something different as and when I could. I've done farm labouring, office work, driving, shop work and so on. And for the last 18 years I've worked in the social care sector, which isn't renowned for its high pay, as many of you will know. I had a 5-year stint in the civil service before that, which happened to coincide with the period when I was married. And that was really the first time in my life that I had money to spare. I could afford to buy any new things I might want, like a computer or a digital camera or a new bike, without having to save or worry about running out. But I can't really honestly say that I was any happier, not in a financial sense. Having extra was nice, but it was just extra, nothing more. I could save for the first time, but I had nothing really that I wanted to save for. Not a new or more expensive car, certainly. We had one of the old Skodas at the time, when they were made by Skoda and not Volkswagen. I've never thought about cars in that way, as things that constantly need updating, as expressions of income, as status symbols or whatever. They're just like anything else, a means to an end, as all those jobs I've had have tended to be. An income to keep a roof over my head, food on the table, enough to cover the bills with a little left over if I was lucky. I've never pandered after expensive clothes, jewellery, holidays, designer this or that. I've only ever had one suit in my life, a 3-piece that I bought in 1983 when I was best man at my brother's wedding. I still have it now, and what's more, it still fits. I've worn it for weddings and funerals, and I wore it for a short while I was in the civil service before they relaxed the dress code. It looks as new as the day I got it 40 years ago. I'm not really a suit person in that respect, as you might gather. T-shirts, hoodies, jeans, shorts, trainers, they've always been my preferred attire. So in that way, living simply has never been difficult for me. Low income has made it a necessity. I work part-time now for an income that I suppose many would regard in this country as poverty level, relatively speaking that is. But it covers my council rent and all my bills, and without the need for me to claim any form of top-up support. I don't have any dependents, children or anything, so there's only myself and my cat to keep. I manage. And I can still usually wind up at the end of each month with a bit left over. Next year I retire and have only got the state pension to come. At the moment that's just under 11,000 a year. A pittance by most standards of what people would call an adequate income for a single person. But I can say now without any doubt whatsoever that it will be enough for me. It'll cover what I need it to cover, and I can assure you that I won't feel in any sense deprived. What would I be deprived of if I have everything I need and an income adequate to cover myself? I can't help here thinking about Mr. Micawber in David Copperfield, Dickens's novel, and the sound piece of advice he gives to young David in the matter of money. Annual income £20, annual expenditure £19.19 and 6, result happiness. Annual income £20, annual expenditure £20 and 6pence, result misery. Quite. Several years ago, a friend who could see how I lived told me that she thought my life was austere and that most people wouldn't want to live like it. I asked her what she meant, so she told me. You live in a one-room apartment, you don't have a TV, you don't have a car, you don't have a freezer, you don't earn a great deal, and you still fit all of your clothes into one small wardrobe, and that includes your shoes. Well, she was absolutely right on all accounts. What's more, all of those things she mentioned still stand to this day. I don't have a TV or a car or a freezer. These aren't deprivations, I simply don't need them. So what would be the point in my having them? What she neglected to ask after is what I did have. I had so much else that was less tangible, less material, you might say. I had what I needed. I had enough. I've never wanted the complexity that comes from having lots of things, entailing maybe lots of expenditure and lots of debts. It was about something more spiritual for me, which I would have thought that she, devout Christian that she was, would have understood. And perhaps secretly she did. Perhaps she even envied that simplicity. I'll never know, because later she married a well-off man and went to live abroad somewhere. Maybe then she was just judging me by her own standards of what she felt constituted the ingredients of a non-austere life. Maybe she just had a different interpretation to mine of wants and needs. Perhaps this is where we come to the nub of the argument with simple living and what it means. As I see it, it means one thing only: cutting back on the less essential things and activities to allow more time and space for the things that give a deeper nourishment to the soul and a greater sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. Simplifying your life means allowing yourself to find out what the things are that really matter to you and to focus on them. This could be starting a new hobby or restarting an old one that got sidelined. Arts and crafts, say, drawing, painting, writing, crocheting, playing an instrument or learning to, learning a new language, gardening, repairing things that are broken or not working and giving them a new lease of life instead of throwing them away. Now, it could also, of course, mean one of the most important things in our lives, spending more quality time with our families, seeing our children grow and being there for important milestones. For many, it will be easier said than done, and particularly with life as it's been here in the UK for the last dozen and more years, with the fallout from a global financial crash, the years of imposed austerity, the more recent cost of living crisis with rising inflation, rising rents, rising mortgage payments, depressed wages, and so on. Having said that, there are plenty of people who do go in over their heads with things. They get mortgages which are perhaps more than they can easily afford. Likewise, purchase loans on cars or large consumer goods, or loans for holidays or home improvements. Again, it can be understood in a consumerist, materialist society where we are bombarded with glossy and glamorous demands to buy, are made to feel, you could say, that the very essence of being is buying. And true fulfillment can only be found through more and more consumption, more and more things. In order to start simplifying them, we have to bring things back to the basics of needs versus wants. We can all want more, and for various reasons, like the things already mentioned. But when does a want become a need? I need a new car, a new fridge, a new microwave, washing machine, TV, kitchen, etc. Why do we need these things? Are the old ones clapped out, or simply a bit out of date or out of fashion? I've always tried never to fall into that trap, and I know how easy it is to fall into. I tend to use things until they either break down irreparably or fall to bits. In very good part, this goes back to the circumstances I was brought up in South London in the 60s, where no one had much money and where the ethos of waste not, want not and make, do and mend was instilled in me, you could almost say, through my mother's milk. I've carried those lessons with me throughout my life. My washing machine, for instance, I bought it second hand 13 years ago. Since then, it's come with me to 2 new addresses. One of the plastic drum paddles broke off a couple of years ago, so using some string I tied it back on. There's rust patches here and there on the front and sides. It looks its age. I can say the same with my fridge, bought second hand 18 years ago and still going strong. And my cooker, now 12 years old, chipped and a bit shabby looking. But what do they all have in common? They still work. They still do the job I bought them to do. So why would I need or want to replace them? A lot of this, as I've said, is what we're conditioned by our upbringing and by the pressures of society as it is to expect, to feel entitled to, so that if we don't have these new things, we somehow feel, how can I put it, disadvantage maybe? Like we're not keeping up with everyone else, as if we need to. How important is it after all? What are we keeping up for? Is it something that we're trying to prove? Do we feel that if we don't have the things that our neighbours or colleagues or friends or perhaps more pertinently other members of our family have, that we're losing out and falling behind? That we're, for want of a better word, failing? So perhaps the first step in moving towards a simpler life is to acknowledge what's going on around us, how we're being enticed and cajoled and manipulated into buying things that we may not need, but which we end up, by deliberate design, wanting. We have to challenge that conditioned mindset that tells us that we have to keep up, that we have to have things to show others. Very pertinent now, I think, in this age of social media, where we can so easily lay our lives wide open for everyone to see. And I wonder sometimes what we're trying to show them. Is it all about, look what I've got, look how successful my life is because of these things I own? Is that how we go about establishing our credentials in a money and property fixated society? I am what I own. I am what I have. I am my income and my possessions. I am my lifestyle. It seems a pretty superficial, frivolous, even shallow way of showing the world who we are and how we've made it, with success somehow being measured by an abundance of money and possessions. I think it's interesting how there is, and has been for some time, a trend in social media for people to show how little they have instead, and how much freer and unencumbered it makes them feel. People who, either by choice or necessity, are living in vans, for instance, either converted, specially made, or otherwise, reducing life to as bare a minimum as possible, notwithstanding some of the hardships that such a life may bring with it. Cold weather, breakdowns, cramped spaces, cramped physical spaces, that is. It's by no means an easy way to live, but it does have the benefit of giving people no choice but to keep things simple. I think once we burrow down through the surface layers of the human psyche, it's an impulse, even an instinct that's there in all of us. Part of that collective unconscious going right back to our days in the caves, then later in huts, a way of life that many people in the world still live now, and that many more are either yearning after or actually reverting to. On that note, I'll leave it. Food for thought, maybe. I'd be interested in hearing your comments below, and thanks for listening.